They called me legacy overhead. Not in a meeting, not in writing, but in the way people say things when they think you are already irrelevant. I was halfway through updating a compliance audit sheet when the video feed crackled to life, and there he was, Matt. 30 years old, if we are being generous. The type of man who probably used the word synergy unironically and believed Excel macros were a form of wizardry. The CFO introduced him as the efficiency fixer, which is corporate code for executioner with a handshake. Matt smiled like someone who had never been told no. Tanned, teeth bleached, hair styled with the confidence of a man who had Googled alpha male fade and trusted the first result. "Hi everyone," he said, flashing the kind of smirk you usually see on men who still do keg stands at weddings. "I'm here to streamline operations and eliminate process redundancies." His eyes moved across the screen, slow and deliberate, until they landed on me. It wasn't curiosity. It was inventory. Like he was deciding which antique chair to throw out first. I didn't flinch. I didn't react. I simply clicked save as on a folder I had been maintaining for over a decade. Every licensing document. Every federal renewal timestamp. Every internal compliance chain tied directly to my name. I renamed the folder Church Pancake Recipes and backed it up to a private drive. Dana Miller was not going out like a rookie. By lunchtime, I heard him in the break room laughing with two junior analysts about phasing out boomer infrastructure. I'm 42, not a boomer, but in Matt's universe, if your workflow didn't look like a TikTok tutorial, you were already dead. In his world, experience was clutter and silence was weakness. That was his first mistake. Then came the huddle. Open floor plan. Everyone standing in a loose circle like it was an exorcism of common sense. Matt pulled up a slide deck filled with meaningless phrases. Agile compliance ecosystem. Decentralized accountability hubs. I watched 3 interns nod like they were witnessing the second coming of Elon Musk. I also watched the people who actually understood the work stop taking notes. Some of our team members, Matt said smoothly, especially those with legacy responsibilities, will be reassessed to ensure alignment with our lean strategy. Then he looked directly at me. "We appreciate your historical contributions, Dana." Historical. Like I belonged in a museum basement next to a cracked typewriter and a faded HR file. I smiled. Not a polite smile. The kind of smile you give when someone steps into a trap you have been camouflaging for years. That night, I stayed late. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. I logged into 3 federal platforms and checked my credentials. Active. Certified. Renewed. Licensing PIN verified. Audit clearance intact. Every timestamp aligned. Every authority chain pointed back to me. Then I printed my contract. The clause nobody ever reads. Section 7C. In the event of involuntary termination, all company-paid licensing responsibilities and regulatory certifications shall be considered void and formally rescinded within 48 hours of contract nullification. A sentence that looked boring. A sentence that functioned like a landmine. Nobody noticed when I left the building that night, but I noticed Matt watching me the next morning. His eyes lingered like a lion staring at a cow. What he didn't know was that the cow had access to predator drones. By Tuesday, Matt had taped a poster above the copier. Compliance does not equal complacency. The font was Comic Sans. That told me everything I needed to know about how seriously this man understood systems. Then came the announcement that everyone, yes everyone, would need to re-interview for their evolved role. It was pitched as a bonding exercise. A chance to reintroduce ourselves. Same jobs. Same titles. Same health insurance cards. Different power structure. People shuffled into conference rooms like kids headed to the principal's office. The newer hires came out smiling, saying things like Matt really sees me and he's bringing fresh air. I wanted to tell them that kind of air usually comes from a broken sewer line. When it was my turn, I didn't bring a resume. I brought silence. Matt barely looked up from his laptop. Dana, you've been here a while. 10 years. 10, I said, calm and steady. Institutional knowledge, he replied. We value that. His fingers tapped the keyboard, probably typing something useless. He pulled up a half-baked organizational chart and pointed to a box labeled Regulatory Stewardship. My name was crossed out. Underneath it said Open to be reassigned. Then he clicked another tab. Q3 Renewal Delegation. The file name read Q3 License Ruth Plan V1. In the comments, someone had written, "Can this be transferred downstream?" Downstream, in Matt's language, meant dumped onto someone too inexperienced to understand the consequences. I smiled again. Inside, alarms started screaming. Back at my desk, I opened the database I had built from scratch in 2016. It tracked every compliance certificate, its expiration date, the governing body it reported to, and who held signature authority. 43 entries. 43 licenses. 43 threads woven into one corporate lifeline. All of them tied to me. I exported the file. Encrypted it. Zipped it. Renamed it Employee Birthday Cake List. Then I emailed it to a private account and wiped the access trail. Call it paranoia if you want. I call it pattern recognition. That afternoon, Matt reassigned my inspection prep to a marketing intern who thought FDA stood for Food Design Aesthetic. I was told to reorganize the janitorial supplies shelf to stay connected at a foundational level. Foundational like mold. When I asked about my admin access, Matt blinked like I had spoken an extinct language. I think we routed that to Chloe last week. You don't really need it anymore, right? Chloe had just learned what a PDF was. I nodded politely. Then I logged into a shadow admin panel I had never documented and revoked her access myself. If I was being pushed off the ship, I was not leaving the map behind. By Wednesday, the fuse was burning. And it was shorter than Matt realized. By Wednesday morning, the erasure was no longer subtle. It wasn't whispers or posters or meetings dressed up as culture. It was technical. Surgical. I logged in and found 3 dashboards locked. 2 of them were systems I had personally designed, tested, and hardened over years of audits and close calls. No warning. No ticket. No request. Just a red error screen and a polite little box that said, "Contact your system administrator." The irony almost made me laugh. I emailed IT. No response. I called HR, voicemail. Cold. Automated. The kind of voice that makes you feel like you're already unemployed. On my 4th attempt, a human answered and told me, with rehearsed cheerfulness, that all HR requests now had to go through my departmental manager. Matt. Always Matt. Like announcing the second coming, but with more hair gel and less divine oversight. I hung up and stared at my monitor. Blank. Glowing. Useless. In less than a week, I had been cut off from every meaningful interface I touched. Still employed. Still clocking in. Strategically erased. Matt was clever in that MBA way. Not clever enough to build something, but clever enough to dismantle it under the cover of policy updates and reorganization memos. His weekly leadership email started including phrases like legacy processes under review and potential staffing overlaps identified. My favorite was redundant certification management. As if federally mandated authority tied to biometric credentials was something you could overlap. I had become a contradiction. Officially present. Functionally invisible. So I adapted. I scheduled a 10-minute appointment at a notary office above a nail salon on Monroe Avenue. No drama. No witnesses. Just a stiff chair, a tired woman behind the desk, and a form titled Voluntary Relinquishment of Licensing Authority. I didn't sign it. I just had the option notarized. A contingency. A safety pin tucked into my coat pocket in case things turned into a free fall. I walked back to the office with a peppermint latte and the deadest smile you've ever seen. Matt passed me in the hallway and said, "Hope you're feeling more aligned this week." I nodded. "Just tying up loose ends." He smiled back. A corporate snake smile you'd find in the self-help section of a bookstore next to Crush It and a scented candle. What he didn't know was that every loose end I tied came with a fuse. The laughter started that afternoon. 3 junior analysts. Fresh out of college. Hovering around a printout of my old compliance flowchart like it was a cave painting. "This thing uses color codes like it's a Crayola box," one said. Another laughed. "She timestamps everything manually. Does she know automation exists?" They stood there sipping cold brew and throwing around words like agile iteration and machine learning integration, as if buzzwords had ever stopped a federal audit. I walked past them with my head high. My spine burned. By Thursday, my email access was delayed. Files took longer to load. Permissions randomly failed. Death by 1,000 friction points. Matt never touched me directly. He didn't have to. He let the system do it. That's how people like him operate. Plausible deniability wrapped in process. Then came Monday. Of course it was Monday. The kind where the air feels like microwaved plastic and everyone pretends they like their job just enough to survive another week. We were gathered for Matt's new weekly momentum sync. It was basically a TED Talk for sociopaths. He stood at the front of the open floor bullpen in a tight blue blazer and made that palms out gesture like he was calming livestock. "Let's start with some candor," he said. "That's always the tell. We've been doing a lot of reflection over the last few weeks," he continued, pacing slowly. "While tradition has value, stagnation is a threat." He stopped behind my chair. I didn't turn around. "Unfortunately," he said clearly, "certain legacy roles are no longer aligned with our forward momentum." People shifted. Someone coughed. A few stared at the floor. One kid tried to smile, like this was normal, like we were watching someone lose a parking spot and not their livelihood. Effective immediately, Matt said, "Dana Miller's position has been phased out." No meeting. No warning. No one-on-one. Just a sentence hanging in the air like a gunshot. I stood up. Not because I was unsteady. Because I was too steady for how badly I wanted to kick him through a wall. HR approached. 2 of them. Both young. Both avoiding eye contact. They handed me a glossy folder like they were offering communion. I opened it. Termination page. No severance. Legal language. A line to sign. I pulled out my own pen and signed in one stroke. "I'll need a printed copy," I said. Matt blinked. "It's all digital." "Printed," I repeated. HR hesitated. I stared. For minutes later, I walked out with a paper copy, a stapled receipt, and the calm of someone who knew exactly what she had just triggered. When I signed that form, Section 7C activated. Across 3 federal databases. A silent tripwire. Every active certification paid for by the company queued for automatic revocation. Not suspended. Not expired. Nullified. At 7:13 p.m., my phone buzzed. Confirmation email. Authority relinquished. Licenses CN 8835 through 44, FD 2210 through 98, MDR 5081-02 formally rescinded. Entities dependent marked non-compliant in 24 hours unless reauthorized by a certified replacement. I didn't forward it. I didn't screenshot it. I didn't reply. I went home, poured boxed Merlot, watched reruns of The Golden Girls, and slept better than I had in months. Because sometimes justice doesn't scream. It waits. Wednesday morning didn't explode. It whispered. At 9:04 a.m., procurement sent a routine confirmation request to a vendor supplying medical-grade filtration components for a biotech client. The kind of material you don't even breathe near without 3 signatures and a biohazard stamp. The vendor replied 11 minutes later. Cannot fulfill shipment. Receiving entity listed as inactive. License CN 8835-44 expired. Contact listed certifying officer. Dana Miller. That was the first domino. 10 minutes after that, the system started choking. Logins failed. API calls stalled. A scheduled data sync to the FDA audit portal returned a clean, merciless rejection code. Invalid license holder. The internal dashboard, once a soothing grid of green checkmarks, lit up like a Christmas tree wired by demons. Red alerts. Orphaned credentials. Compliance status unknown. Matt strolled into the operations pod with a to-go cup from a downtown cafe and the confidence of a man who had never met consequences. We'll just update the contact info, he said casually, like he was changing a calendar invite. Renee spoke up. Poor kid. Smart. Nervous. Sir, contact updates require certification reauthorization. Dana was the certifying officer. Matt blinked. So do it anyway. She was the only credentialed officer with authority across all active verticals, Renee continued, voice tight. No one else is registered with the Federal Compliance Board. Re-registration takes weeks. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was terminal. The kind you hear right before someone realizes the iceberg is not going to move. Matt rubbed his temples. Why didn't anyone tell me this earlier? Renee swallowed. Dana did. Meanwhile, I was at home in sweatpants eating knockoff cereal and reading an anonymous email chain a former colleague had blind copied me on. Someone had included a screenshot of Matt's Slack message to legal. Anyone know how to override a license expiry tag in the dashboard thingy? He called it a thingy. That dashboard had been my project for 5 years. I designed it to lock tighter than a bank vault if certain revocation events fired. It wasn't bureaucratic. It was surgical. By lunchtime, the system had done exactly what it was designed to do. Matt tried to brute force access. The system blacklisted his IP and auto-reported the intrusion to internal audit logs. Upper management started pinging each other in panic. Can we get Dana back? Does her NDA prevent communication? Who signed off on this? Nobody answered. The only person who could was deciding between soup or wings for lunch. I chose both. That afternoon, I checked the company's public profile. Still proudly advertised federally certified across all operations. I almost felt bad. Almost. By Thursday, that lie was going to cost them more than pride. Friday morning arrived quietly. Just the soft ping of a calendar alert. FDA randomized site inspection. 10 a.m. randomized, yes, but within a window I had always prepared for. Color-coded spreadsheets. Vendor cycles. Renewal timing. Even lunar phases if necessary. The auditors didn't joke. They walked in with clipboards and the moral authority of tax collectors in body armor. By 9:22, the front desk called compliance. There are 3 inspectors here. They're asking for the license holder. Silence. Long panicked. Because there wasn't one. Matt, now visibly sweating through his navy blazer, sprinted to legal. Can we get Dana's credentials reinstated? A junior associate started Googling license reinstatement like it was a baking recipe. Matt tried logging into the federal board portal using my old credentials. Access denied. Password reset. User not found. He called the help desk. Transferred 3 times. Finally, a calm voice explained that Dana Miller had voluntarily relinquished her licensing authority. Her ID was removed from the registry. Reinstatement required full recertification. Average timeline 4 to 6 weeks. Matt stared at the speakerphone like it had insulted his family. What clause did she use? He demanded. HR flipped through my file. We just processed standard exit paperwork. Someone from audit spoke up. Didn't she have a personal clause in her contract? That's when the room remembered. I wasn't some dusty compliance relic. I was the linchpin. And they had yanked me out like a loose tooth connected to the spine. Across town, my phone buzzed. Liz from documentation. Kind woman. Baked cookies during audit weeks. Dana, she whispered, did you do this? I stirred my coffee. Looked out the window. No, I said calmly. You did. You clicked. This wasn't revenge. It was arithmetic. Auditors waited in the lobby. The company legally couldn't grant access to secured areas without a licensed officer present. That meant the audit couldn't proceed. Which meant every vendor and client depending on certified compliance entered technical breach within 4 hours. That afternoon, I got my nails done. Midnight burgundy. Not because I needed to. Because power doesn't need to rush. Monday morning smelled like stale coffee and fear. At 8:37 a.m., Gregory T. Winslow walked into the building. CEO. Tanned. Glowing. Silk shirt still creased from wherever he'd been pretending to work. He expected mild turbulence. He walked into a plane crash. Operations frozen. Shipments halted. Certifications invalid. Clients furious. Revenue flatlined. Who's handling this? He asked. Every head turned to Matt. Gregory pulled up my termination paperwork on the wall screen. Read. Scrolled. Read again. You fired the license holder. Matt stammered. Her responsibilities were redundant. Gregory laughed. Not humor. Disbelief. Her name is on every regulatory document this company depends on to exist. Legal slid a folder across the table. Top 5 vendors suspended. All contracts frozen. My name on every page. It's a federal license, Gregory snapped. Not an email alias. He looked at HR, get her back. Matt swallowed. She might not want to return. Gregory stared at him. She'll return. We'll pay whatever it takes. Even he knew it wasn't true. Because I wasn't standing at the gate anymore. I had already left the kingdom behind. The call came at 6:42 a.m., which told me everything before I answered. Power never waits for business hours when it's bleeding. Gregory's voice was smooth, controlled, practiced. He didn't apologize. He didn't threaten. He offered restoration. Title. Budget. Authority. A return framed as a rescue mission. I listened without interrupting, stirring my coffee slowly, watching steam rise like something leaving a body. When he finished, I thanked him for the clarity and said no. Silence followed, heavy and unfamiliar. Men like Gregory rarely hear refusal delivered without emotion. By mid-morning, the company issued a public statement citing unforeseen compliance disruptions and temporary operational pauses. Investors panicked. Vendors tightened terms. Clients requested emergency meetings. None of it mattered to me. I had already moved on. Not emotionally. Structurally. I filed incorporation documents under a neutral name, leased a modest office, and transferred my professional liability coverage. Quiet moves. Clean moves. The kind you make when you intend to exist without asking permission. Power, real power, is portable if you build it correctly. Gregory called again that afternoon, this time less polished. He mentioned consequences. Litigation. Breach of duty. I reminded him, politely, that voluntary relinquishment is not sabotage. It is consent withdrawn. My contract had allowed it. Legal had approved it years earlier, smiling at the efficiency without imagining the leverage. He asked what I wanted. I told him nothing. He didn't understand that answer. People accustomed to transactions assume every outcome has a price. Some outcomes have direction instead. The following week, 3 former clients contacted me directly. Not to complain. To ask questions. They wanted continuity. Stability. Someone who understood the machinery beneath the promises. I explained my availability, my rates, my boundaries. 2 accepted within hours. 1 hesitated, then followed. I didn't poach. I didn't advertise. Gravity did the work. When institutions wobble, competence becomes visible. I staffed slowly. Carefully. Only people who understood that compliance is not paperwork. It is architecture. Matt resigned quietly. No farewell email. No LinkedIn announcement. Just absence. HR framed it as a mutual decision. Gregory remained, but diminished. His interviews grew defensive. His language softened. Confidence without infrastructure always does. Regulators completed their audit months later. Fines were issued. Certifications reinstated after exhaustive review. The company survived, technically. Survival, however, is not the same as dominance. Everyone learned that lesson. Some too late. I ran my firm without slogans. No motivational posters. No buzzwords. Just systems that worked and contracts that told the truth. We designed redundancy that respected people, not replaced them. Every authority had a successor. Every license had context. No single point of failure, including me. That was the difference. I didn't want to be indispensable. I wanted the structure to be inevitable. One evening, months later, I ran into Liz at a grocery store. She hugged me awkwardly, eyes bright. She told me she'd left too. Found something better. Safer. She thanked me. I corrected her. I told her she'd chosen herself. I'd simply refused to disappear quietly. There's a difference, and it matters. Agency spreads when someone demonstrates the cost of compliance without consent. Gregory never called again. Matt never resurfaced. The industry adjusted. Policies were rewritten. Exit clauses scrutinized. Companies remembered that people are not modules you can uninstall without consequence. Somewhere, an MBA program updated a case study, sanitizing the details. That was fine. Legend survived dilution. The lesson remained intact for those paying attention. On my office wall, there's no mission statement. Just a framed copy of my relinquishment confirmation. Date. Time. Reference number. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Authority granted can be authority removed. Calmly. Legally. Permanently. I don't wield it often. I don't need to. The knowledge is enough. Sometimes justice is loud and public. Sometimes it is a form signed at the right moment by someone who understands the system better than the people trying to own it. I didn't burn the house down. I stepped out and let gravity do the rest. When you design exits as carefully as entrances, you never have to beg to be let back in.